On the brightest wedding morning, Uman has every scene. A black pastor feels a weight like stone under his ribs. The bride, a beautiful black woman draped in ivory silk, is flawless. The air, colder than it should be. When the sanctuary doors close, truth claws its way in. A hidden phone, forged papers, a whisper of a cult that marries men to bury them. What should be vows becomes an intervention, then a manhunt, then a war. From a counseling room with humming fluorescents to a blood-stained mountain altar at midnight, Pastor Daniel Ayoola, groom David Obi, and a black community on edge race to sever a serpent by the root before the list of marked men turns into an obituary of the living. The morning the whole town of Umans had been waiting for arrived with a sky so blue it looked painted. The church courtyard blazed with color, bright Ankara fabrics, gold head wraps, men in crisp agbada, while camera crews drifted like dragonflies, searching for angles that would prove they had been present at the wedding of the year. At the far end of the compound, Pastor Daniel Ayoola stood in his office behind a glass pane that overlooked the sanctuary, hands resting on a well-worn Bible. For 25 years he'd preached here, married couples here, buried loved ones here. And yet, as he watched ushers angle white lilies along the aisle, something low and heavy pressed beneath his ribs, as if a stone had been set inside his chest. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. He inhaled and exhaled slow. Out in the hall, the choir tested a harmony, soft, river-smooth, and the sound floated through the slit of his door. The ceremony would be lavish, even by Uman standards. David Obi, only son of the prosperous Obi family, would wed Adanna, the elegant young woman everyone swore looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. The Obis had invited commissioners, business magnates, editors, people whose names opened gates in Lagos and beyond. David, broad-shouldered in a tailored ivory suit, had already arrived with his friends, laughing too loudly, burning off nerves. And somewhere just beyond the gate, a convoy idled with the bride's car. Pastor Ayoola smoothed his robe and tried, earnestly tried, to shake the feeling. He had met the couple twice in premarital counseling. David did most of the talking then, happy and eager, the kind of man who thought love could solve anything as long as you held on tight. Adanna had sat politely, her smile soft as candlelight, answering when spoken to, never volunteering, almost like she had memorized lines and was afraid to miss a cue. At the rehearsal, when he asked them to practice their vows, she had laced her fingers through David's and squeezed, not trembling nervous, but firm, cool, possessive, as if the grip itself were a promise she intended to enforce. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was overtired. Maybe the city's buzzing rumor mill, people loved to build myths around the Obis, had seeped into his bones. He watched a security lead, Brother Michael Bayo, cross the aisle and motion to a cameraman to step back from the front pews. The choir rose to full volume. The organist placed his hands on the keys. And as the sanctuary doors swung open and people stood in a rustle of silk and murmurs, Adanna appeared. For a moment, the pastor simply studied what everyone else praised, a dress that hugged clean lines, a veil that poured like water, hair pinned with silver that winked beneath the lights. Her face was camera perfect, foundation matched, lips a red that didn't shout, and for an instant he resented the heaviness pressing his chest. Then she took 2 measured steps forward, and the air inside the church changed. Nothing dramatic, just a small, inexplicable coolness. The choir faltered, half a breath, and recovered. Phones tilted, guests smiled, and Adanna's smile, which had been framed for the doors, went flat. Her lips moved, almost imperceptibly. Not singing, not praying, whispering. The pastor didn't hear words, only the sensation of words, a trace of shape on air. He lowered his chin and whispered, "Jesus," the way a man checks a lock he knows he already turned. Adanna continued down the aisle, bridesmaids fanning her train like a living cloud. David's friends elbowed one another. David himself softened, shoulders dropping as his eyes found hers. He looked like a man arriving home. The pastor looked like a man bracing for a wave. By the time the bride reached the front, the press of weight inside his chest had moved to his throat. He welcomed the congregation, voice steady. He invited them to sit, to breathe, to honor the sanctity of vows. He opened the Bible and could not, for the space of a heartbeat, read a single line on the page. "Why now?" he asked silently. "Show me why." He raised his eyes to the couple. David smiled at him, trusting, grateful. Adanna returned the smile, but it landed wrong. Her hands trembled, a narrow vibration, the kind that camera might miss, but a pastor's eyes do not. He closed the Bible. "Before we proceed," he said, calm traveling on top of a current of dread, "I need a brief word with the couple." No one moved at first. Sound wrapped the sanctuary. A baby shifting, bracelets clinking, a camera shutter motor whirring. Then the murmurs started, and the phones, and the uneasy laughter that rises when an event tries to keep its dignity while something unexpected claws at its edges. Brother Michael stepped near the aisle. Mama Obi, regal in deep blue gele, straightened in the front pew. The pastor forced a soft smile, the kind that asks for trust and promises explanation later. "Just a moment," he said, "for the good of all." He led them from the light to the small counseling room behind the pulpit, where fluorescent bulbs hummed and a clock ticked loud enough to sound like judgment. The room was a rectangle, hardly bigger than a hospital ward. Its walls painted the pale green every church chooses when it wants calm without expense. A table, two simple chairs, a third pulled from the corner. A cross hung askew above a corkboard, crowded with counseling schedules and choir rotations. The air carried the faint scent of polish and lilies. Brother Michael slipped in quietly and shut the door. An elder, Mama Ruth, joined them at the pastor's signal. Another set of eyes, another witness. Transparency mattered. If this pause became a story, he wanted it to be a true one. David took the chair to Adanna's right, placing his hand over hers. She didn't recoil, but she didn't lean either. She held like a statue holds, perfectly balanced, built not to move. The pastor remained standing. He didn't slam the Bible down. He didn't thunder. He let the silence grow tall enough that truth might have space to step in. "David," he began, tone even, "tell me again, just for the record, how you first met Adanna." David glanced at Adanna as if asking permission to describe his own happiest. "Charity gala in Umons," he said. "She was helping an elderly woman get through the crowd. I noticed her patience. We talked. He smiled helplessly. "We kept talking." "Good," the pastor said. He turned to Adanna and softened his voice. "My daughter, I'm asking this with respect. Is there anything you need to say before I join you together? Anything at all you've been holding?" Adanna tilted her face toward him, her gaze a clear lake. "No, Pastor," she said. "I am ready." The clock ticked. A gust somewhere under the door flicked the edge of a paper pinned to the notice board. The pastor set the Bible on the table and opened to the Psalms without looking down. "Then allow me a simple test. Place your right hand here." He waited, gave her time to refuse if her conscience demanded it. She laid her palm on the leather cover. Her fingers looked steady. Her wrist looked steady. The fine tendons along her hand, however, drew tight. "In the name of Jesus," he said, not loud, not dramatic, "let there be, if there is darkness hiding where light should be, let it be exposed. And if there is evil planned against this man, scatter it now." Her hand twitched. It was small, like a shiver under skin, but it sent a ripple through the room. David's grip tightened. "Babe, you okay?" "I don't like this kind of theater," she said, almost laughing. "It's our wedding day." "I understand," the pastor replied. He reached into a file he had carried in with the Bible and slid out 2 sheets, copies of their counseling intake forms. He read a line he had circled yesterday, the sentence that had dragged a little like a fishbone in his throat. "Baptized at St. Michael Parish, Obelendi." "Who was the priest who baptized you?" he asked gently. Adanna blinked. "Father Chooks," she said after a breath. "Or maybe Father Michael. It was a long time ago." "Of course." He looked to Brother Michael, who had already pulled out his phone. The security lead did not tap the internet. He tapped a contact he used when he needed the kind of answer the internet could not guarantee. An old schoolmate who worked at the parish office in Obelendi. "Just verifying," Brother Michael murmured, stepping to the side, voice low. The pastor kept his eyes on Adanna, not accusatory, not indulgent, simply present. He slid the second page toward her. "And your Aunt's Street, where you told me you live, would you mind writing it here again, for our records?" "Pastor," David said, "is this necessary?" The pastor offered him the sadness only men who love their flock can offer, the tenderness that hurts because it is honest. "It is, son, for your protection." Adanna took the pen, wrote a name. The pastor watched the way she formed letters, the way her hand hovered half a second too long at the end of the line, as if she were deciding whether to add or subtract. Brother Michael returned, the color in his face altered by a shade. "Sir," he said, keeping his words neutral, "St. Michael's records don't show a baptism for her birth name. They suggested perhaps a different parish." "Records can be wrong," Adanna said quickly. This is petty." "Perhaps," the pastor said, "which is why we need more than one thread." He nodded to Mama Ruth, who opened a small envelope and drew out a still photo printed from the church's exterior camera, the kind of grainy frame that never made the news because it was too clear to be thrilling. The timestamp was 8:42 p.m. the night before. The image showed the bride's dressing room corridor. A woman in dark glasses was passing a small object, a vial, into a hand that, by shape and ring, belonged to Adanna. She didn't recoil. "It's essential oil," she said smoothly, "for my nerves." "Did you tell our counselors you were treating anxiety?" "No," she said, and lifted her chin, "because I am not a problem to be solved." The clock sounded another minute. A car horn hiccuped outside and died. In the front pew, somewhere beyond the wall, the murmur of the restless congregation rose and fell like surf. The pastor took a final item from the file, a rehearsal note, scribbled by a young deacon after Thursday's run-through. Bride declined communion. Stomach upset. Will try Sunday. He placed it next to the still photo and did not say what he was thinking, that some refusals are ordinary and some are the body's fear of light. David stood up abruptly, the chair legs hiccuping against tile. "Pastor, with respect, this is—" His voice tripped on the next word and fell. "This is our day. If you had concerns, you might have shared them earlier." "I didn't have evidence earlier, only a weight. Evidence is arriving now." He gentled his tone. "David, I need you to step into the hall with Brother Michael for 5 minutes." David stared. "No. Please, 5 minutes." He turned to Mama Ruth. "Stay." He faced Adanna. "And you, my daughter, if there is anything at all that will endanger this man, this church, your soul, speak it now while mercy is still the nearest door." Something in Adanna loosened and then hardened again. "I have nothing to say," she replied, and when she tried to slide the counseling form back across the table, the pen hopped and clattered, a small sound that felt too loud. Brother Michael guided David gently toward the door. The pastor waited until it clicked shut. The fluorescent light ticked. He could feel, more than see, Adanna's breath beginning to quicken. "Who gave you the vial?" he asked, voice like a hand extended across a gap. She stared at him, like a person stares at a cliff they have already climbed too high to retreat. "Pastor," she said, the word almost tender, "you do not understand the size of what you are touching." "Then help me understand." Her eyes shone, not with tears, those came later, but with a varnished brightness that suggested a woman already rehearsing a new version of herself. She lifted her hand from the Bible and folded her fingers together, slow, precise. "I was told the church loved truth. Prove it." The pastor nodded once, as if they had agreed on terms. He reached for the intercom that connected to the usher's hall and pressed the button. "Brother Michael, retrieve the bride's backup bag from the dressing room, please, and bring in Detective Kelvin if he has arrived." Adanna's lips parted. For the first time since the door closed, something like fear edged the line of her mouth. Outside, in the sanctuary, the organ vamped a soft, looping hymn meant to calm guests who were already taking out their phones. In the corridor beyond the counseling room, footsteps gathered, faint and purposeful. Inside, the pastor rested his palm on the Bible again and exhaled as if he had been holding his breath since the door opened. "Mercy is still the nearest door," he repeated, and waited to see if she would walk through.
The small counseling room felt like it had been carved out of silence itself. The hum of fluorescent light pressed against the walls, the ticking of a clock grew louder with each second, and even the faint murmur of the congregation outside sounded distant, muffled, like ocean waves on the other side of stone. Pastor Daniel Ayoola stood with his Bible still closed, the weight of his hesitation pulling the atmosphere tighter. He was not a man easily rattled. He had spent decades marrying couples, guiding them through conflict, burying the broken. But something about this bride sat wrong, like a sharp pebble inside a shoe you could not shake out. He let his eyes linger on Adanna, her posture poised, her face composed, her beauty undeniable. But beneath the surface polish, he saw details others missed, the way her hands trembled slightly, the way her breathing hitched when silence stretched, the faint narrowing of her eyes whenever he mentioned the word truth. He had seen such signs before in people who carried secrets like locked chests chained to their ribs. "David," the pastor said softly, turning to the groom, "remind me again, how did you meet Adanna?" David smiled immediately, like a boy recalling a story he loved telling. "At a charity gala, Pastor. She was helping an elderly woman carry water through the crowd. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was kind, patient, different from everyone else in the room." His voice thickened with affection. "I knew then I had to talk to her. We stayed up until dawn. She told me about losing her parents young, about living with her aunt. She wanted to dedicate her life to helping the poor. Pastor, she's everything I ever prayed for." Adanna gave a small, controlled smile, but Pastor Ayoola noticed something. The way her gaze didn't meet David's as he spoke, the way she pressed her lips together like someone memorizing her part in a play. He took a step closer, his voice warm but edged with steel. "My daughter, you've heard what David has shared. I ask you now, before God and before us, do you have anything to confess, anything to set right before we continue?" Her expression didn't waver. "No, Pastor, I am ready." The clock clicked to the next minute. Ayoola opened his Bible and laid it on the table. "Then place your right hand here." For a heartbeat, she hesitated, just a flicker, barely noticeable, then lowered her hand onto the worn leather. The pastor set his palm lightly over hers. He didn't thunder or shout. He whispered, "In the name of Jesus Christ, if there is any darkness hidden here, let it be exposed. If there is any evil prepared against this man, scatter it now." Adanna flinched, withdrawing her hand as though burned. Her voice wavered for the first time. "This isn't necessary, Pastor. You're making drama where none exists." David frowned, gripping her other hand. "Babe, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly, avoiding his eyes. I just don't like theatrics." The pastor nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. He turned to Brother Michael Bio, head of security, who had slipped quietly into the room. "Michael," he said, "contact St. Michael's Parish in Obalende. Confirm if a baptism record exists for Adanna under her birth name." Adanna's composure cracked slightly. "That was years ago. Records could be lost. Why is this important?" "Because truth leaves traces," the pastor replied. Michael stepped aside, phone already in hand, murmuring into the receiver. Ayoola shifted to another detail that had gnawed at him. He drew out a note from premarital counseling, written by a deacon. "Bride declined communion, stomach upset, will try Sunday." He placed it on the table. "Do you remember refusing communion last week?" She blinked. "Yes, I wasn't feeling well." Strange, how illness comes only when the bread and wine are offered. Before she could reply, Michael returned, his expression grave. "Sir, I checked. There's no baptism record for her at Obalende, none under her name or her aunt's household." David's face paled. "Maybe another church pastor. That doesn't mean anything." Ayoola held up his hand. "Perhaps, but the truth is patient. It always waits to be found." The pastor turned his attention back to Adanna. "My daughter, who is your aunt? Where exactly do you live with her? Write the address here." He slid a sheet of paper and pen toward her. She hesitated. Then, with slow precision, she scribbled an address. The pastor studied her handwriting, the pause at the end of the line, the way her hand shook once before she steadied herself. He didn't comment. He simply folded the paper and set it aside. The silence thickened. The fluorescent bulb flickered once, buzzing overhead. In the distance, the restless congregation murmured like a hive of bees. Finally, David snapped. "Pastor, with all due respect, this is our wedding day. You've counseled us, you've prepared us. Why now? Why these questions?" Ayoola's voice dropped into something low and weighted. "Because when your bride walked down that aisle, my spirit heard words that no bride should ever speak, words that warned me if I blessed this union, blood would be on my hands, and I will not, cannot ignore that." The words hit David like a slap. He looked from the pastor to Adanna, confusion scrawled across his features. "What is he talking about? Adanna, tell him!" Adanna's eyes filled, but not tears, with fury. "He's mistaken. He's tired or imagining things. I was praying for strength." "That kind of strength?" the pastor asked quietly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. In that instant, the door creaked open. Brother Michael Bio stepped back in, holding a small black clutch bag. His face was tat. "We found this under the vanity table in the bride's dressing room," he said. "Pushed far to the back, hidden." He set it on the table. The pastor nodded slowly. He didn't open it yet. He simply looked at Adanna. Her hands, folded so neatly in her lap, now trembled in plain sight. "My daughter," he said softly, "sometimes the truth reveals itself before we even search for it." David looked at the bag, then at her. "What is that?" he demanded. She didn't answer. The pastor reached forward, unzipped the clutch, and began to pull items out one by one. Makeup, tissues, a small perfume bottle, then deeper, something heavier. A burner phone, black and cheap, vibrating suddenly with a hidden life. Its screen lit up with 2 words, unknown caller, timer, 00, midnight. David staggered back, color draining from his face. The pastor closed the Bible and placed it firmly on the table, his decision final. "We will not return to the altar, not until the whole truth comes into the light." Adanna exhaled, and for the first time her mask cracked, her face folding into something raw, frightened, and terribly human. The whispers outside the door grew louder. The wedding of the year had just begun to unravel.
The sanctuary had grown restless.
200 guests sat on padded pews, their bodies shifting, voices buzzing like an impatient beehive. At the front, the choir stalled on a soft hymn, repeating the same chorus in shaky harmony. Ushers fanned themselves nervously, while photographers adjusted tripods, whispering to one another. This was supposed to be the wedding of the season, a flawless union of love and wealth, yet the bride and groom had been absent from the altar for nearly 20 minutes. Phones began to rise, first one, then another, until glowing screens dotted the hall like fireflies. Some guests whispered into live streams. Others posted photos with captions, "Pastor stops wedding, drama unfolding at Uman's cathedral." A trending hashtag was already forming, hashtag runaway bride cult, hashtag saved by pastor. Near the front row, Mama Obi, dressed in a resplendent blue gallet, clutched her beaded pendant. She leaned toward her sister, whispering, "Something is not right. Daniel does not delay without cause." Backstage, in the small counseling room, Pastor Daniel Ayoola had just unzipped the clutch bag and pulled out the burner phone. Its screen glowed in the dim light. A vibration rattled against the table, insistent, almost mocking. Unknown caller. Adanna's eyes locked on the device, her lips pressed together in a hard line. "Answer it," David urged, his voice breaking with suspicion. "Who's calling you?" She shook her head. "It's nothing, a mistake." The pastor tilted his head, studying her. "Mistakes don't vibrate with such timing. If this phone is yours, then take it. If it is not, explain how it came to be hidden under your table." "I don't owe you an explanation," she snapped, her composure finally cracking. "This is my wedding day. You're ruining it." The pastor's voice remained calm, but beneath it was iron. "A wedding built on lies is already ruined, my daughter." David's chest heaved. He reached for the phone, but the pastor stopped him with a hand. "No," Ayoola said firmly. "This is not for you to touch. There may be more here than you know." At that moment, Brother Michael Bayo re-entered, flanked by Detective Kelvin, a lean man in plain clothes with sharp eyes. "Sir," Michael said, "the crowd is growing anxious. People are starting to demand answers." Detective Kelvin's gaze fell on Adanna, then on the burner phone. His lips tightened. "Where did you find this?" "Hidden," Pastor Ayoola answered, "just beneath the bride's vanity table." Kelvin pulled on gloves and lifted the device carefully. He pressed the green button. The room filled with silence. Then a voice, distorted, mechanical, crackled through. "Why the delay? The papers are ready. Is he dead yet?" David staggered back as if struck. What did he just say?" Kelvin's face hardened. He ended the call and slid the phone into an evidence bag. "This is no mistake," he said flatly. Adanna's mask shattered. Her shoulders collapsed inward. Her breath came sharp, ragged. "I didn't want this," she whispered, almost too soft to hear. David stared at her, confusion and betrayal carved into every line of his face. "Didn't want what? To tell me what's happening." But she said nothing. Tears welled, then fell, streaking the perfect makeup the town had praised. The pastor turned toward the door. "Michael, escort the couple with me back to the altar." Kelvin frowned. "Pastor, are you sure? We should detain her now." Ayoola shook his head. "No. The people must hear the truth in the light, not in the shadows of this room. If we try to hide it, rumor will feed on lies. We will show them what is real." When the doors to the sanctuary opened, a hush fell like a sudden storm. Guests craned their necks, phones tilted higher. The pastor walked first, Bible under his arm, face calm but unreadable. Behind him came David, pale and trembling, then Adanna, veil askew, her mascara streaking. Brother Michael followed last, his presence a warning. The choir's voices died mid-note. The organist lifted his hands from the keys. Pastor Ayoola ascended the steps to the altar.
He placed the Bible on the stand, but didn't open it. Instead, he turned to face the congregation, his voice carried with clear authority. "My children, today was meant to be a celebration of love, but the Spirit of truth does not always allow us to proceed as we plan. Before I can bless this union, there is something that must be said." Gasps rose. Phones tilted forward like a wave. David looked at the pastor, pleading, "Sir, please, don't humiliate us like this." Ayoola's gaze was steady. "David, humiliation is nothing compared to a life cut short. Listen." He lifted the evidence bag, holding the burner phone. Murmurs swept the hall. "This was found hidden in the bride's dressing room. A few minutes ago, it rang. A voice asked, 'Is he dead yet?'" The congregation erupted. Shouts, gasps, even laughter of disbelief. Ushers scrambled to calm people. Mama Obi covered her face, trembling. Adanna collapsed to her knees, weeping openly now. "I didn't plan to fall in love. It was never supposed to go this far." David recoiled as though her words were venom. "What are you saying? Ada, what are you saying?" The pastor lifted his hand for silence. His voice thundered now, no longer calm, but charged with urgency. "This marriage cannot proceed. Not today. Not ever. Darkness hides in places meant for light, but today it is exposed. David Obi, you have been spared by the mercy of God." The congregation broke into chaos. Some clapped, praising God aloud. Others cursed under their breath, outraged by the spectacle. Cameras flashed wildly. A few guests rushed for the exits to call newspapers. The story was no longer rumor. It was living history, unfolding in real time. David staggered backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. He turned to his mother, eyes wide and wet. "Mama, what do I do?" Mama Obi rose, her gele gleaming under the lights. She wrapped her arms around her son, pulling him close as if shielding him from the crowd. "You do nothing, my son," she whispered fiercely. "God has already done it." The pastor closed his Bible and stepped back from the altar. "This service is ended," he declared. "Go in peace. Pray for truth. Pray for mercy." Gasps and cries echoed as he set the microphone down with finality. He turned and walked out through the side door, robes trailing behind him, like a man leaving a battlefield he had not chosen, but could not avoid. Behind him, the wedding of the year dissolved into confusion, a hall of unanswered questions, and the knowledge that something darker than heartbreak had just been averted.
The sanctuary was still vibrating with shock when Pastor Daniel Ayoola guided David and Adanna back into the small counseling room. The congregation roared behind the walls, some praying, some cursing, others posting breathless updates online. But in here, the noise softened to a muffled thunder. Only the fluorescent bulb's hum and the tick-tock of the wall clock cut through the stillness. Adanna slumped into a chair. Her veil sagged, and streaks of black mascara cut trails down her face. David stood over her, breathing fast, eyes wide with betrayal. His trembling hands hovered near his sides as if he wanted to hold her and strike her all at once. Pastor Ayoola remained standing, Bible against his chest. Detective Kelvin lingered near the door, Brother Michael beside him like a sentry. "Adanna," the pastor began softly, "this is the moment for truth. Before God, before this man you promised to love, before your own conscience. Tell us who you really are." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her chest heaved, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. David slammed his hand on the table. "Speak! What are you hiding from me?" She flinched, then whispered, I wasn't supposed to care. That was never part of the plan." David froze. The plan? Her tears spilled freely now. I was meant to get close, that's all. Close enough to finish it. But I didn't expect to feel anything. I didn't expect to love you." The words hit David like stones. He staggered back, grabbing the chair for support. "Finish it? Finish what, Adanna?" Pastor Ayoola's gaze sharpened. "Who sent you?" Adanna shook her head violently. "You don't understand. If I tell you, I die. They don't forgive betrayal. Better you speak and live in truth than stay silent and perish in darkness," the pastor pressed. Her body trembled. She buried her face in her hands. It was supposed to be simple. The wedding, the papers, the honeymoon, one drink, that's all. Then he'd be gone by morning. His estate transferred. I would mourn in front of everyone and hand the rest to them. David staggered forward, his face twisted in disbelief. "You were going to kill me, poison me like I was nothing." "I didn't want to anymore," she cried. "Not after I knew you. But they said if I ran, if I disobeyed, my blood would be spilled instead." Detective Kelvin stepped closer, voice firm but even. "Who are they? Names, locations?" Adanna shook her head. "No names, only numbers, only robes, only shadows. They don't call each other anything real. I never saw their faces." Pastor Ayoola lifted the Bible and placed it on the table between them. "Place your hand here again, Adanna. Swear it." She recoiled. "I can't. I don't want the light near me." "That is because light burns what hides in the dark," Pastor Ayoola said quietly. David pressed his palms into his eyes, rocking slightly as though to wake from a nightmare. "All those nights, all those words, you were lying?" Her voice cracked. "Not all. The last 2 months were real. When you sang to me, when you held me through the nightmares, I wanted to believe I could escape them. But I was already too far in." His jaw tightened. "So what was I to you? A mission? A signature on a will?" Her sobs deepened. "You were the target." The words landed heavy in the air, as if the room itself had lost its breath. Pastor Ayoola leaned forward, his voice carrying weight. "Adanna, the mercy of God reached you at this altar. Confess fully. Who controls you? Where do they gather? What is their purpose?" She swallowed, her lips trembling. "There's a woman. They call her Madame K. No one sees her face. She walks with a limp, but her voice commands everything. She trains the girls, teaches them how to act, what to say. We're placed with wealthy men, men with land, men about to inherit power. Once they die, we inherit, and the cult takes their share." Detective Kelvin's pen scratched quickly across his notebook. Pastor Ayoola pressed further. "Where is Madame K now?" Adanna's eyes darted to the corner of the room as if seeing something invisible. Her breath hitched. "She's watching. She always watches. Even here." Brother Michael made the sign of the cross. The pastor reached into his robe and drew a small vial of anointing oil. He placed a drop on his thumb and pressed it lightly to Adanna's forehead. She hissed, jerking back violently, as if the oil burned. "You see," Pastor Ayoola said, "the truth and the lie cannot sit in the same chair. One must break." Adanna collapsed onto the floor, weeping. "I wanted to leave. I swear I did. But every girl who tried to leave ended up dead. Car accidents, drownings, sickness that doctors couldn't explain. I thought I could survive by obeying. But then I met him." She pointed shakily at David. "I didn't plan to care, but I did." David's face was streaked with tears. He dropped to his knees, gripping her shoulders, torn between love and fury. "If you cared, why didn't you run to me? Why didn't you tell me before today? They would have killed you first. They said once you were marked, there was no escape." Silence pressed heavy on the room. Detective Kelvin cleared his throat. "Pastor, we need to take her into custody. If what she says is true, this goes beyond one wedding. This is organized crime, murder for inheritance, a cult, possibly dozens of victims." Pastor Ayoola nodded solemnly. He looked down at Adanna, broken on the floor. Your secrets have been dragged into the light, my daughter. The wedding is over, but your soul still has a chance if you repent fully." Adanna closed her eyes. "Will God forgive me?" "Yes," the pastor said, "if you truly turn. But your path will not be easy. Truth burns away lies, but scars remain." David rose slowly, his body shaking. He turned his back to her, hands clenched, his voice a whisper. "I loved you, and you would have buried me with your own hands." Mama Obi appeared at the doorway, tears on her cheeks. She had heard enough. She crossed the room, placed her hands on her son's shoulders, and pulled him into her chest. "You are alive. That is what matters. She did not succeed. God has spared you." The pastor signaled to Brother Michael, "Escort her to the back room, call the authorities officially, quietly, no scene." Michael nodded and lifted Adanna gently to her feet. She no longer resisted. Her veil slipped entirely, trailing on the floor like a shed skin. As they led her away, Pastor Ayoola whispered to David, "You trusted. You loved with your heart. Do not see yourself as a fool. Good men do not think like wicked people. You were marked, but heaven said no." David said nothing. His eyes followed Adanna's retreating figure until the door closed behind her. Then he collapsed into the chair, head in his hands, a man whose wedding had ended not with vows, but betrayal laid bare.
They moved Adanna to a side office with frosted glass, a room used for counting offerings on Sundays and counseling wayward teenagers on Fridays. Now it looked like an evidence locker waiting to happen. Detective Calvin stood at the center table, snapping on night trial gloves, while Brother Michael Bio set down the black clutch he'd pulled from under the vanity. Pastor Daniel Ayoola remained beside the door, calmer than anyone else, a steadying weight in the room. "Chain of custody starts now," Kelvin said, voice clipped. "Video rolling?" Michael tapped his phone. The red light blinked. "Rolling." Calvin nodded once and unzipped the clutch in a measured, methodical sequence. No sudden moves, no contaminating prints. He lifted items out one by one, calling each into the camera. Item 1, compact powder, silver case. Item 2, lip stain, crimson. Item 3, travel-sized perfume bottle, unlabeled. Item 4, he paused. Burner phone, black, low-cost model. Previously rang with an unknown caller during questioning. He bagged it separately, labeled it, sealed the bag with tamper tape. David watched from a chair in the corner, elbows on his knees, hands laced so tightly the knuckles whitened. He looked hollowed out, as if someone had scooped him and left the shell. Kelvin reached deeper. Item 5, folded manila envelope tied with string. He set the envelope down and glanced at the pastor. "May I?" Ayoola nodded. Inside, neatly stacked and clipped, were documents that pretended to be legitimate with the arrogance of a perfect forgery. Photocopies of identification, a notarized form bearing a glossy stamp, and pre-filled financial sheets. He called them out. Durable power of attorney, purporting to grant authority from David Obi to Adanna, effective upon marriage or in the event of incapacity. Notary seal, O. Amole, Commissioner for Oaths. He lifted the page closer. Seal feels wrong, flat ink, not embossed. Signature smells like printer toner. He set it aside and lifted another. Proposed life insurance beneficiary change. Policy number redacted here, but will subpoena the carrier. Beneficiary, Adanna. Effective date, blank, to be backfilled. Another stack. Draft letter of instruction to bank manager, authorizing access to safety deposit box on presentation of marriage certificate. And at the bottom, handwritten condolence letter. To whom it concern, my husband passed too soon. Calvin looked up. This was pre-written, all of it staged. David let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. She wrote my death notice before I said I do. Pastor Ayoola placed a hand on his shoulder, but didn't speak. Sometimes comfort arrives first as quiet. Kelvin lifted a final page, thin and almost translucent. Template will. Names blank, roles filled. If they'd gotten your signature under sedation or duress, it would have looked legitimate to a sleepy clerk. Michael zoomed the camera. "Get the stamp," he said. "People online will ask." Kelvin held the fake notary seal steady beneath the lens. "We'll confirm the commission number. If it's real, it's stolen. If it's fake, someone in a print shop is making a living off death." He resealed everything and took photos from 3 angles, then turned to Adanna, now seated with a female officer by the door, wrists in front, not behind. She looked drained of color. "Do you want an attorney present?" Kelvin asked. She shook her head. "There is no lawyer who can stand between me and them." "Then there should at least be truth," Pastor Ayoola said, voice low, warm as coals. "Truth stands where fear cannot." Adanna stared at the table. "I didn't write the will template. They gave it to me. I copied the condolence letter in my own hand, so it looked personal." "Who gave you the packet?" Kelvin asked. "A woman, always in black. The one I told you about, Madam K. She never came close enough for me to see her face, only her hands, thin, bony, with a gold ring shaped like a serpent." Kelvin's pen moved. "Where?" "A boutique near the highway into Lagos. It looks like a fashion house from the street. Inside, the back room is for special clients." She laughed without humor. "That's what they call us." Ayoola met Kelvin's eyes. There was the shape of a trail forming now, a path through the bramble. A soft knock at the door. Michael cracked it open, then turned back. "Sir, a man at the gate says he knows the bride, says it's urgent. He has papers." "Name?" "He says people call him Mozzie, former landlord." "Bring him," Ayoola said. A minute later, a man in his 40s stepped in, shirt wrinkled, shoes dusty, sweat at his hairline. He removed a cap and clutched it like a talisman, eyes darting to Adanna and back to the pastor, as if unsure which world he had just entered. "Good afternoon, sir," he said to Ayoola, then to Kelvin. "Officer, I saw online the wedding stopped. I recognized the woman." He nodded towards Adanna without looking at her face. "She rented a flat in Abba from me 3 years ago. Cash up front, 2 years. Said she ran an herbal business with a friend. At night there were people, women in black robes, chanting, screaming sometimes. They poured red liquid at the gate. They told me it was palm oil. It didn't look like palm oil." Adanna's shoulders curled inward. Kelvin held up a hand. "Sir, do you have documentation?" Mozzie fumbled with a folder and spilled its contents. Receipts, photocopied ID forms, a photo print of a lease agreement with his signature and a tenant name that matched one Adanna had used on a counseling form. He also had phone screenshots. "He has a WhatsApp group for landlords," he explained, tapping his battered smartphone. "Last night someone posted her wedding flyer. It said, 'Is this your former tenant?' I couldn't sleep. Then I saw the hashtag, 'Pastor stopping the wedding.' I came." "Why now?" Kelvin asked. It wasn't suspicion, exactly. It was the habit of a man who'd learned that timing is its own evidence. "Because I was afraid before," Mozzie said simply. "But fear grows fat when you feed it. I have a niece her age. I kept thinking, what if it was her caught in this? Better I come." Kelvin took the folder, laid each document flat and photographed them beside a ruler for scale. He read off key details for the recording, the rent amount, the dates, the alias used. He asked Mozzie to state his full name and contact twice for the record. Then he looked at the pastor. "This gives us historical context. It's more than rumor." Ayoola nodded. "Truth leaves traces." Mozzie glanced at Adanna again, not unkindly. "You were always polite, but too careful, like every word had been ironed before you spoke it." She stared at the tabletop. "I was trained." "How many others?" Kelvin asked. She lifted her head. 20 in my group, all girls recruited young. We learned posture, makeup, how to listen, how to make powerful men feel seen. It starts with compassion at charity events, ends with signatures and funerals. Michael's jaw clenched. That boutique. Name. I never saw a sign, but the seamstresses call it House of Kimi. It's a whisper name. If you say it loud, people look away. Kelvin pocketed the note. We'll verify through registrar records. If it's a legal business, it leaves paper. If it's not, it leaves cash. Another knock at the door. Mama Obi this time, face stern with grief contained. May I? She asked. Ayoola opened wider to let her in. She went straight to her son, cupped his face, then turned to Adanna. For a breath, she only looked at her, no words, just the weight of a mother who had already buried a husband and will not bury a child because someone dressed betrayal in lace. Why my son? She asked. Adanna's voice thinned. Because he was about to inherit oil contracts his father secured. They wanted the transfer clean. A young widow raising funds for charity draws little suspicion. Mama Obi's necklace, a string of traditional ivory beads, glowed against her blouse as she inhaled and steadied herself. She put a hand on the table, near the condolence letter. You would have read this to my face, she said. It wasn't a question. Adanna didn't deny it.
Kelvin stepped in again, redirecting the current. All right, here's how this proceeds. He held up the sealed evidence bag. The phone goes to the lab. We'll pull call logs, IMEI, geolocation history if possible. The documents go to financial crimes. We verify the notary, the insurance policy, the bank letters. We'll seek a judge's warrant for the boutique and any associated properties. We do this clean, so it holds. He looked to the pastor. I'll need your external CCTV footage, counseling sign-in sheets, and any digital copies of rehearsal notes. Already being compiled, Ayoola said. Brother Michael? Michael nodded. On a secure drive within the hour. Kelvin turned to Mazi. Sir, you'll give a formal statement, then we'll arrange for your protection for 72 hours. If your niece posted that flyer, tell her to take it down. You're helpful, but now you're visible. Mazi swallowed and nodded, relief and dread mixed. Thank you, officer. He started for the door, then looked back at Adanna. Pray truth saves you, he said in a tone that made clear he wasn't sure whether to call her victim or perpetrator. Maybe both. When the door shut, the room exhaled. Outside, the sanctuary thunder had softened into a low, persistent buzz, reporters gathering at the gates, guests arguing about refunds, choir members crying in clumps. David stood and faced Adanna. You had everything, he said, each word slow, deliberate. Kindness, safety, a home that would have welcomed you. You chose shadows. She shook her head. I was chosen by them long before you saw me. And yet, the pastor added gently, you still held a choice today, and you chose to speak. Adanna's eyes flicked toward him with painful gratitude, and then back to David with what could only be called bereavement for a future she had rehearsed and murdered herself. Kelvin tucked the evidence bags into his case. I'm transferring her now, he said to the pastor. A female officer will accompany. She'll be processed, held, and questioned with counsel offered. We'll log her statement regarding this House of Kimi and Madam K. If she draws us a map, we'll add it to the warrant affidavit. Ayoola nodded. I will pray with her once more before she goes. He did not pray long. He did not pray loud. He placed a drop of oil on his thumb, touched her forehead lightly, and said, Mercy for the repentant, light for the lost, fire for the root. When they led Adanna out, David didn't follow. He sat again, staring at his hands as if they might still hold a ring that had never been given. Mama Obi stood beside him, one arm around his shoulders, the other gripping her beads the way sailors grip rope in storm. Brother Michael killed the recording and looked at the pastor. Sir, the town will eat itself with gossip by nightfall. Then we will feed it truth, Ayoola said. Kelvin paused at the doorway. Pastor, understand, this is not simply about one woman or one wedding. From what I'm seeing, this is organized. It has funding, a recruitment pipeline, and legal fronts. If we pull one thread and don't move fast, they'll burn the rest. Ayoola's eyes held steady. Then we will not move alone. He lifted his Bible, not as a weapon, not as a prop, but as a reminder. The kind of reminder that turns fear into movement and despair into work. The evidence lay bagged and labeled on the table. The path, thin, dangerous, real, had opened. And somewhere beyond the walls of the church, in a showroom of fine fabrics and perfect mirrors, a woman with the serpent ring would hear that the wedding had been stopped, and she would begin to plan what came next. The church grounds were quiet by dusk, but not calm. Guests had gone, gossip already racing through WhatsApp groups and Facebook posts, each version of the story more twisted than the last. Inside the prayer garden, Mama Obi sat alone on a stone bench beneath the jacaranda tree, her blue jelle now loosened around her shoulders. In her hand, she rolled a small silver pendant, a teardrop shape that had once belonged to her late husband. She rubbed it between thumb and forefinger, the way some people worry a rosary bead. Whenever fear crept too close, she touched the pendant, as if the weight of her husband's memory could steady her. Tonight she rubbed it raw. Her mind replayed Adanna's words, "You were the target." The phrase gnawed at her like rats in the walls. She whispered aloud to the empty garden, "Not my son, Lord, not my only son." Her phone vibrated suddenly. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Good evening, Mama Obi," a low male voice rasped. "Don't ask my name. It's not safe." Her back stiffened. "Who are you?" "A friend, or perhaps just someone who doesn't want to see more blood. If you want the full truth about why Adanna was sent to your son, meet me at 10 o'clock tonight, behind the old sawmill. Come alone, no phone. If you bring anyone, you won't see me." The line went dead. She stared at the phone, torn between terror and the mother's instinct. Trap or truth? The pendant burned against her palm, heavy as judgment. At exactly 10, Mama Obi's headlights cut through the weeds around the abandoned sawmill. The structure loomed like a skeleton, beams sagging, tin roof rustling in the Harmattan wind. She stepped out with only her pendant around her neck and a small flashlight clutched like a weapon. "Over here," a voice whispered from the shadows. A man emerged, tall, wiry, face worn by poverty and fear. His shirt was frayed, his sandals broken, but his eyes, darting, haunted, belonged to someone who had seen too much. "I used to be one of them," he said quietly. Her heart stumbled. "One of the cult?" He nodded. "That's how I know what I know. Your son was marked. They keep a list. Men with land, contracts, inheritance. Women like Adanna are trained and placed like bait." She gripped the pendant tighter. "Why my David?" "Because next month he inherits his late father's oil contracts. If he had died this week, the assets would have gone to his bride. She would pass them along to the cult. They would bleed your family and feed off his name." Mama Obi gasped, tears threatening. "So it was all about money?" "Money and blood," the man said. "Every powerful death strengthens their offering. It isn't just business, it's sacrifice." Her legs weakened. She leaned against the rusted truck bed. "What happens now?" "They will not stop. If the bride fails, they send another, or they strike another way. Accident, poisoned food, even dreams. They only care about the list." He slipped a folded paper into her hand. "These are the names. Guard them with your life. Show your pastor, but be careful. Some of his workers may already be marked." Before she could question further, he melted back into the trees, leaving her alone with the sound of crickets and the cold weight of the paper. By dawn, Pastor Ayoola met Mama Obi in his prayer study. The room smelled of frankincense and old leather, its walls lined with dog-eared Bibles. She placed the folded paper on his desk. "Who gave this to you?" She told him everything, the call, the sawmill, the man who claimed to be a defector. Ayoola unfolded the paper, his breath caught. Written in neat block letters were half a dozen names: businessmen, a government official, a church deacon, and at the bottom, David's name, underlined twice. The pastor's hands tightened. "This is worse than I feared." "Is it real?" Mama Obi whispered. He looked her in the eye. "Yes, too detailed to be fiction." She covered her mouth, fighting sobs. "Then we are not safe, none of us." He rose slowly, placing the list on the floor before the altar in his study. Kneeling, he spread his hands over it and prayed aloud, voice thick with urgency. "Father, these names are more than ink. They are lives. They are families who trust you. Show us the snakes hiding in the grass. Expose every traitor. Break every snare." There was no thunderclap, no burning bush, but in his spirit he felt something firm, a direction. Start with David. Seal every door. He stood, face pale but resolved. "We move now. We pray over his house, every window, every threshold. We cannot wait." That morning, just after 6, Pastor Ayoola arrived at the Obi residence with 4 intercessors and bottles of anointing oil. The house, modern, gated, proud, already felt like a battlefield waiting for enemies. David met them at the door, his eyes bloodshot, his suit from the aborted wedding still draped over a chair inside. "You're early, Pastor." "I couldn't sleep." "I gathered you didn't either." David shook his head. "Every sound feels like death knocking." The pastor placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's lock the doors in the spirit." Room by room they prayed. In the bedroom they anointed the bed frame. In the kitchen they touched the fridge, the stove, the water pitcher. At each window they prayed, "No entry for darkness." At each door, "No access for death." Mama Obi followed, clutching her pendant, whispering amen with each declaration. Then, a knock at the gate. Brother Michael opened it cautiously. A delivery man stood holding a white box tied with a red ribbon. "Delivery for Mr. David Obi," he said. David frowned. "From who?" "No name," he shrugged. "Dropped off at the park this morning. Instructions to deliver by 7 sharp." Pastor Ayoola approached. "Open it here." The man untied the ribbon. Inside was a fruitcake, rich and moist, dotted with cherries. No note. David's face drained. "She promised. Adanna promised she'd bake me a fruitcake for our wedding night." The pastor's voice cut firm. "Don't touch it. Brother Michael, take it to the church office. Lock it. It is not food. It is a door." The delivery man shifted nervously. "Sir, should I—" "Go," Ayoola ordered. As the man retreated, David whispered, "You think they're trying again?" "They are, and they will not stop with cake. But heaven sees and heaven warns." David slumped onto the doorstep, covering his face. "How did my life become war? I just wanted love." Ayoola knelt beside him. "You were born for more than contracts and land. They marked you because through you they wanted a gate, a passage for destruction. But you are not theirs, not now, not ever." The intercessors poured oil at the entrance, sealing it. Mama Obi kissed her pendant and closed her eyes, whispering thanks that her son was still alive. That night, Ayoola sat alone in his office. The list lay before him, heavy as stone. He prayed long into the hours until his knees ached and his voice was raw. At last, he heard again that quiet whisper in his spirit, "This is not the end. Others are marked. Follow the fire." He opened his eyes slowly. He knew then the fruitcake was only the beginning. The war had already moved from the altar to every street, every household on that cursed list. And unless they uncovered the cult's roots, the blood would not stop.
The sun had not yet risen when Pastor Daniel Ayoola spread the hand-drawn map across his office table.
The paper trembled in the draft from the ceiling fan, but the lines were steady. Adanna's last gift before fear silenced her. A hill outside Kogi State. No name, no road. Just a path drawn in red ink and a word scrawled at the top, altar. He studied it with eyes that had seen too much in the past 72 hours. Around him sat Detective Kelvin, Brother Michael Bayo, and 2 trusted elders from the prayer team. On the table, bottles of anointing oil, flashlights, and a small bag of supplies. No guns, no uniforms, no sirens, only faith and preparation. "We leave tonight," Ayoola said. "This is not just geography, it's their throne. If we don't break it, they'll come back stronger." One elder shifted nervously. "Pastor, we don't know what we'll find there. This could be an ambush." Ayoola's gaze was firm. "It will be dangerous, but light was never called to hide from darkness." Detective Kelvin leaned forward, tapping the map with his pen. "I've arranged for backup. A small team, plain clothes, no marked cars. We'll go quietly. If we make noise, we spook them. We need evidence, not just ashes." "Evidence we'll get," Ayoola replied, "but the altar must fall." That night, at exactly 11:45 p.m., a van pulled away from the church compound. Inside were Pastor Ayoola, Kelvin, Brother Michael Bayo, and 2 trusted elders from the prayer team. On the table, bottles of anointing oil, flashlights, and a small bag of supplies. No guns, no uniforms, no sirens, only faith and preparation. The road out of town was long and silent, the kind of silence that prickles the skin. At 12:17 a.m., the van stopped at the base of the hill. Crickets had gone mute, as if the air itself was listening. The group stepped out into tall grass, flashlights sweeping arcs of pale light. "Stay close," Ayoola said, "and no words unless it is prayer." They climbed in silence. The hill rose steep and narrow, trees crowding both sides like guards. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until the breath misted before their faces, though it was still dry season. After 30 minutes, the path widened to a clearing. And there it was, the mountain altar. A flat stone table sat in the center, stained black with age and darker things. Around it were 12 chairs, each carved from wood and painted in streaks of red. Behind the table towered a wooden statue draped in crimson cloth, its shape vaguely human but twisted, limbs wrong, face featureless. Pastor Ayoola stepped forward. "This is where they've been feeding death." Kelvin's flashlight swept the ground. Ashes, burned cloth, torn pages from Bibles, bones too long to be animal. He swallowed hard. "God help us." Suddenly the air shifted, a rustle in the trees, then laughter, low, whispered, surrounding them. "They know we're here," Michael hissed. Ayoola raised his Bible. "Then let them watch. They will see their end." He poured oil across the stone table. "In the name of Jesus Christ, every altar fed by blood, break now." The others joined, voices rising in fierce prayer. The ground trembled under their feet. The crimson cloth on the statue rippled, though no wind blew. Then a voice screamed from the trees, high, female, not human. "Leave now or die!" One of the intercessors faltered, stumbling back. Kelvin drew closer to Ayoola, hand instinctively on his holster, though he knew bullets wouldn't help here. The pastor pressed on. "Every watcher, every priestess, every tongue raised against us, silence!" The wind roared, branches whipped like lashes. The statue convulsed, then burst into flame, though no match had touched it. The chairs toppled one by one. The stone table cracked straight down the middle with a thunderous snap. And then, silence. No laughter, no whisper, only the crackle of fire and the pounding of hearts. Ayoola stood in the ashes, face glistening with sweat, robes clinging to his skin. "It is finished," he said softly. They poured oil at the edges of the clearing, sealing it. Then they turned and descended the hill, the firelight fading behind them. At 5:33 a.m., the van rolled back into the church compound. Exhausted but alive, the men stumbled out. Ayoola barely had time to sit when Kelvin's phone rang. He answered, then froze. "What do you mean missing?" The room tensed. Kelvin ended the call, face grim. "Adanna. The guards found her outside her cell, unconscious. No forced entry. On the wall, 3 words written in blood." He hesitated. She spoke too much. Michael's knees buckled. They silenced her. Pastor Ayoola closed his eyes, pain etched deep. He whispered, "Not with poison, not with blade, with fear so strong her body gave up." Kelvin's voice was hard. Her lips were black, fingers stiff, eyes wide open, as if she saw something no human should. Ayoola lowered his head, whispering, "Lord, we need your help." By noon, the cult had struck again. 2 names from the list were already gone, one in a car accident, another missing entirely. The enemy was speeding up, covering their tracks. That evening, Ayoola gathered 10 leaders in the church's conference room. Elders, ministers, heads of departments. He told them everything: Adanna's confession, the list, the altar, the death in custody. When he finished, silence suffocated the room. Then the choir mistress spoke. "Pastor, you said someone inside may already be helping them. Do you think it is one of us?" Ayoola's eyes scanned the faces, familiar, trusted, tired. "I don't know, but someone close has betrayed us, someone who smiles during service and plots in the shadows." A murmur rippled through the room. Fear, suspicion. The pastor lifted his Bible and set it on the table with a thud. "We will find them. Light will expose them. But until then, pray, watch, and open your eyes." That night, as the compound fell silent, a shadow slipped through the back gate. Hooded, silent, they carried a small black bottle. At the pastor's office door, they bent low, pouring dark liquid at the threshold. But a voice cut through the night. "Looking for something?" It was Brother Michael, flashlight in hand. The figure bolted, sprinting through the prayer garden, leaping the low wall into the darkness. Michael shouted, "Security, close the gate!" But it was too late. The intruder was gone. On the ground, the bottle rolled, half spilled. Inside was thick liquid, dark as tar. Ayoola arrived minutes later, lifting it carefully with a cloth. Blood mixed with charm powder. It attracts confusion and death. He stared into the night. They're desperate now. The altar is gone, but their spies remain. In the days that followed, funerals were held for men on the list. Fear gripped the town like a fever, yet the church did not close, the prayers did not stop. And deep inside, Ayoola knew, destroying one altar was not victory. It was only the first strike in a war that had now come to their doorstep.
By midweek, the church felt like a fortress wrapped in a whisper campaign. People prayed with one eye open. Mothers checked locks twice. Men on the list stopped driving themselves. The altar on the hill was ash now, but ash has a way of traveling, riding wind, staining sleeves. Pastor Daniel Ayoola knew it. So did Detective Kelvin. The enemy shrine was broken, yes, but the network that built it still breathed. At dawn, Pastor Ayoola spread ministry rosters across his desk: choir, ushers, youth, prayer, media. Every head of department had handed over full names, contact numbers, and duty schedules. He drew circles around 4 names that didn't sit right, people who always volunteered for keys, for late-night lockups, for errand runs no one else wanted. "Call a closed meeting," he told Brother Michael Bio. "Heads only, and when they arrive, lock the gate." By 7 a.m., 10 leaders sat around the conference table. The sanctuary was quiet. The compound gates stood shut. The pastor walked in holding a Bible and a folder. He did not greet with small talk. He wrote 3 words on the whiteboard in thick marker: "Who betrayed us?"
Silence. A chair creaked. Somewhere outside, a generator coughed. This church stopped a wedding. We also pulled the thread. The altar broke, but our enemy did not. 2 men on the list are already dead. Someone inside is feeding them our steps. Faces tightened, eyes flicked. Sister Faye, choir mistress, clutched her notebook like a shield. Deacon Ken, head usher, sat ramrod straight, jaw set. Elder Chinyete from the prayer band adjusted her wrapper, hands trembling. Sister Vivian, the youthful, efficient leader of the church's college group, kept her gaze down on her phone, leg tapping under the table. Ayoola questioned them one by one. Where were you last night? Who had keys? Who saw the hooded figure Brother Michael chased? He didn't press like a policeman. He pressed like a man who has watched lies crack under kindness. But when he reached Vivian, kindness had to share space with steel. Where were you between 10 and midnight when the intruder poured blood at my office threshold? He asked. Vivian didn't look up. At home, Pastor. Alone? Yes. Anyone who can confirm? No. Her throat bobbed. I live alone. Detective Kelvin, sitting quietly at the end of the table, slid a sheet forward. Phone records place your device at the junction near the Abattoir Road at 10:24 p.m. A Keka driver identified you by your red scarf. He says you gave him a bundle to deliver to Madame K. Vivian's head jerked up. For the first time, fear flashed through the makeup she wore like armor. That driver is lying. Brother Michael set another document down, an HR screening printout. The national ID you submitted 5 years ago shows a different birth name. There's a court record from Enugu that disappeared mid-process. Same photo, different name. A tremor ran through her. I changed my name for personal reasons. Pastor Ayoola placed a gentler sheet in front of her. A photocopy of a notebook page recovered from Adanna's bag. Names of girls trained under a woman called Madame K. Vivian's name sat in the second line, written in Adanna's tidy hand. He didn't shout. He simply said, "The light is here, my daughter. Speak." Something inside her gave way like termite-bitten wood. She slid off the chair to her knees, palms flat on her skirt. We were never meant to stay this long, she wept. They placed me to watch. I only sent schedules, prayer topics, who was traveling, who was weak. After the wedding failed, they said I failed my task. They said I would be the next offering if I didn't finish what Adanna started. Who is they? Kelvin asked, voice clipped. Madame K. She works with 3 men. I never saw their real faces. We meet in places that can be burned, rooms that leave no history. But there is a new center, a place they feel safe enough to gather. Thursday night, behind the old abattoir, outside Lagos, a bungalow with black curtains. Address, Kelvin said. Vivian swallowed and recited. Michael wrote it down, then had her confirm it twice. Kelvin's fingers had already begun to move, texting a secure number. We'll need a judge-signed warrant, search and seizure of any ritual implements, forged documents, devices. No sirens, plain clothes. If we're loud, they scatter. Ayoola nodded. We go with you. Kelvin gave a half smile that never reached his eyes. Figured you'd say that. All that day and the next, preparations moved like an invisible river. Kelvin's CID contact drafted affidavits, burner phone logs, forged POA copies, landlord testimony, the altar map, and Vivian's sworn statement. A magistrate signed off just after sunset. A plain panel van was fueled and staged. 2 backup cars waited off route. Radios were checked, batteries swapped, gloves packed, evidence bags counted. There would be no second chance.
At 10:46 p.m. on Thursday night, the van rolled to a stop behind a row of shuttered shops near the abandoned slaughterhouse.
The air reeked faintly of old meat and rain. Kelvin killed the headlights. "Phone's on airplane mode," he murmured. "No chatter. We go in on my count." Inside the van, Kelvin, another CID officer named Ngozi, a third called Tunde, Brother Michael, and Pastor Ayoola, out of his robe, in a dark shirt, Bible in a small satchel. He looked more like a tired professor than a man about to walk into a den. They slipped down a narrow path where weeds brushed knees and rats scattered. Ahead, a low bungalow crouched behind the abattoir wall, windows covered in black cloth, a single porch bulb burning yellow. A man in a black cap leaned against the doorframe, holding a stick like he knew how to use it. He was not armed, but his eyes were. "Tunde, left," Kelvin breathed. "Ngozi, right. Michael, hold rear. Pastor, stay with me." They split. On Kelvin's three-finger count, they moved. Tunde and Ngozi hit the guard from both sides, quick and quiet, pinning his arms, folding him to the ground. A grunt, a muffled curse, a strip of tape. No alarm. Kelvin tried the knob, locked. He eased a tool from his pocket, worked the mechanism like he was coaxing a stubborn confession. The latch gave with a soft click. He pushed the door. Inside, 5 people sat in a circle. 2 women, 3 men. Candles guttering in bowls of dark liquid. On the table, charms dusted red, lengths of string, photos spread in a fan. 2 faces stared up from the prince, David Obi and Pastor Daniel Ayoola. The women moved first. One hissed a word in a tongue that made the hair on Michael's arms rise. The other's hand darted toward her mouth, an old trick, teeth to tongue, bleed out before a name can be spoken. Pastor Ayoola was faster than he looked. He crossed the distance in 2 strides, caught her jaw in a firm, gentle grip, and prayed under his breath. No more blood. The candles went out as if a wind had passed through the room, though the air was still. The second woman sagged, weeping without tears. The men lurched to run. Tunde met one in the doorway. Ngozi swept the legs of another. Kelvin was everywhere at once, shouting rights, cuffing wrists, bagging knives, kicking a box back under the table with the toe of his boot to keep a third man from grabbing it. Brother Michael shut the door, back to it, eyes sweeping the black-curtained windows for movement. Outside, a dog barked 3 houses away, then fell silent, as if someone had put a hand on its muzzle. "Hands where I can see them," Kelvin snapped. "Nobody moves." He nodded to Ngozi, who snapped on lights. The room was worse in brightness. Strings of cowries nailed to the wall, a chalked circle on the concrete floor, a shallow metal basin where something like ash clung to the rim. In a corner, a locked steel chest, paint flaking, a coiled chain on top. "Affidavit covers closed containers," Kelvin said. Tunde produced bolt cutters from a duffel with an efficiency that said he'd done this dance before. The chain snapped. Inside the chest, passports, ID cards, SIM packets, uncut notary seals, blank stamps, 2 forged marriage certificates, and a ledger that looked like it had been kept by a careful, cruel accountant. Ngozi photographed each layer before Kelvin or Tunde touched it. She said, "Ledger shows dates, initials, amounts, and look, here, code for widow disbursed." Pastor Ayoola lifted one of the photos from the table, his own face in grainy print. He laid it back down with the quiet certainty of a man who had already given his fear to God. He said, "They were planning our funerals." Michael swallowed, rage boiling up and settling again. He knew that this was not the place for rage. Evidence was an altar too, one that, if built properly, could hold evil to account without fire. Kelvin moved to the women.
"You tried to bite your tongue," he told the one the pastor held. "That means you know we're close enough to hurt your bosses. Good. We want Madame K. Names, accounts, safe houses." The woman stared past him, eyes glassing over like someone trying to leave her body. The other spoke first, a whisper rasping like sandpaper. "You won't find her. She is a shadow." "Shadows have bodies," Kelvin said. "Shadows pay rent. Shadows buy fuel." He held up the serpent ring photo Ngozi had just pulled from the ledger's sleeve. A hand, thin and bony, a gold serpent curling around a finger. The caption, "House of Kimmy, delivery, 7 p." "Where is this?" he asked. The woman's jaw trembled. She nodded toward the wall. "Back door. There's a tunnel, short to the alley. A car waits there after meetings. If you run now, you'll catch nobody. They heard the candles go out." Kelvin's mouth tightened. He knew when a chase was over before it started. "Fine," he said. "We don't need their shoes if we have their fingerprints." He lifted the ledger. "And their books." He turned to the men, now kneeling with wrists zipped. "Names," he said. None spoke. He didn't repeat himself. He cataloged tattoos, scars, bangles. He called out heights and distinguishing marks for the camera. He read the warrant aloud for the mic, reciting each clause like liturgy. Then he bagged the serpent ring photo and the forged seals with the care of a man packing porcelain. Pastor Ayoola moved to the chalked circle, knelt, and pressed a thumb of oil into the concrete. He didn't shout. He said softly, "No more death bought here. No more widows manufactured." An hour later, the bungalow sat empty under a bare bulb. The guard had been hauled away, the 5 inside were chained and loaded, faces turned down. In the van, the ledger rested on Kelvin's lap like a live thing. He didn't smile. Not victory. Not yet. But the shape of a case had formed. Dates, accounts, a boutique name, a serpent ring, a pipeline from flirtation to funeral. On the ride back, no one spoke. The city lay on its side, breathing in narrow alleys and behind shuttered stalls. Somewhere beyond the black curtains and broken locks, a woman with a limp would be counting her losses. She would tell herself she could outwait the storm. She would be wrong. As they rolled through the church gate, Brother Michael exhaled for the first time in an hour. What now? Kelvin patted the ledger. "Now we turn books into handcuffs." Pastor Ayoola looked toward the dark sanctuary, toward the pulpit where he had almost blessed a funeral disguised as a wedding. He said, "And we turn fear into thanksgiving, one name at a time."
The church swelled with color again, but it wasn't a wedding palette anymore. Ankara prints moved like small flags of survival. The choir, dressed in white, stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the cross. There were no lilies, no aisle runners, no camera cranes sweeping for glamour. Just faces, 1,000 of them, turned toward the altar as if the morning sun itself had chosen to rise indoors. A week had passed since the ruined vows. 7 days of rumors, arrests, whispered confessions, and sleepless nights. In that time, Detective Kelvin and his team had folded the bungalow into evidence. Forged seals, the serpent ring photo, SIM packs, the ledger that read like a cemetery index. Judges had signed warrants, bank accounts froze, 3 more suspects vanished. 2 had been picked up trying to bribe a clerk whose phone was already tapped. The city had learned new words: House of Kimi, widow pipeline, inheritance murders, and spoken them with disgust reserved for plagues. But today was a different word: Thanksgiving. From the first chord, you could hear it, the strange, sturdy music that comes when a congregation decides to sing louder than their fear. Drums, shakers, hands clapping like rain. As the worship rose, Pastor Daniel Ayoola stood off to the side of the stage, head bowed, lips moving. He had not slept much this week. The ledger still haunted his desk. Adanna's final hours reeled without sound in his mind, yet he felt something like a firm plank underfoot. Light, once lit, does not ask permission to keep burning. He stepped to the microphone only after the choir's final hallelujah curled into silence. "My children," he said, voice even, "today was meant to be another kind of service. But the God who interrupts is the God who saves. We gathered to say thank you for a life spared and for truth that refused to hide." He beckoned David Obi and Mama Obi forward. A hush washed the hall the way wind flattens tall grass. David looked thinner, his jaw shaded with a week of poor shaving, but his eyes were clear. He took the mic with both hands as if it might slip. "I almost died," he said plainly. "No theatrics. Not just in my body, though that was planned, but in my soul. I thought I was building a home. I was walking into a funeral." There were sniffles in the second row. A woman covered her face with a scarf. "Thank you," David continued, angling toward the choir loft, "to every usher, every elder, every member of the prayer team who refused to let embarrassment win. Pastor, you stopped the ceremony and saved my life." He swallowed. "I don't know how to repay that. I only know I will not waste it." He turned to his mother. "And you, Mama, who held me when the whole town watched me break. The Lord preserved your only son. You told me something 3 nights ago when I asked if this war would ever stop." He glanced at Pastor Ayoola, half smiling at the memory of her iron will. "You said, 'It will stop because they picked the wrong family.' I believe you." Applause rose, warm, human, not the fevered kind that forgets pain. It ebbed of its own accord. "Finally," David said, "to anyone who loved someone who was not who they said they were, anyone nursing shame, hear me. Good people assume good. That is not stupidity. That is strength. Do not let wickedness make you doubt the decent parts of yourself." He handed the mic back to the pastor and stepped aside. Mama Obi squeezed his fingers, then placed her palm lightly on his chest, the way mothers bless. Pastor Ayoola faced the crowd. "You have heard the testimony, now hear the assignment." He lifted a folder. "Starting today, this church adopts a safe wedding protocol. Counseling will include background checks with consent. Dressing room access will be logged, vendors will be vetted, and any private advisement will include a neutral witness and an audio record. We will not make fear a god, but we will make wisdom a friend." A rumble of approval moved across the pews. "We will also fund a support line for anyone coerced by cults, traffickers, or violent partners. Confidential. Pastoral care with legal referrals. Mercy is not naivete. Mercy is a sword that cuts chains." He set the folder down. "Our faith does not fear evidence. Evidence is faith's ally because truth is one thing, not two." Heads nodded, hands lifted. Somewhere a baby cooed, slicing the solemnity with life. He paused and chose a gentler tone. "Some of you are carrying anger for Adanna, either too much or not enough. Some want her punished twice. Others want her remembered as only a victim. I will tell you what I tell my own heart. Two truths can sit together without fighting." He inhaled. "She was a weapon aimed at a good man. She was also a woman broken by those who taught her to be a weapon. God will judge the root. We must pull it up." On the back wall, a projector flickered to life, not with footage of the raid or the cell, but with a list of names, first names only,
men and women who had already stepped forward to share suspicious approaches, gifts, charity invitations that soured. Each name represented a door that would now stay closed. He said, "Finally, a word to the serpent who readies new disguises." His voice did not swell. It narrowed. "We see you. We saw your altar. We have your books. You will answer to the law you thought was asleep and to the judge who does not sleep." No one shouted amen. They didn't need to. The sentence felt like a bell struck on stone. He raised a hand. "Let us pray." There were no theatrics, just a pastor's steady baritone, and a people who had learned again how to breathe together, for justice to be clean, for witnesses to be safe, for those already grieving to be held, for the city's gatekeepers, clerks, bankers, notaries, to feel the eyes of heaven on their pens. When the service ended, it didn't really end. It spilled into the courtyard, songs reborn as chatter, babies tossed from hip to hip, the smell of jollof rising from foil trays, reporters kept politely at the fence by ushers who had found their spines. In the office, volunteers fielded calls for the new support line. In a side room, a young woman with a trembling voice recounted how a mentor tried to train her to speak less so a rich man would listen more. An elder took her hand and said, "Not today." Across town, Kelvin sat at his desk, the ledger open like a wound. On a corkboard, the serpent ring photo and a boutique receipt sat joined by red thread. A clerk in records had identified the seal's commission number as stolen. A registrar had whispered the names of 2 fashion houses that quietly swapped signs every 6 months. He wrote warrants, drank cold coffee, and thought about the way the candles had died in that room, as if something had inhaled them. He was not a man of church. He was a man of files and fingerprints, but he allowed himself just once to pray a clumsy prayer he had learned as a boy. Let nothing hidden stay hidden. That night, as the courtyard lights winked out and the sanctuary settled, Pastor Ayoola walked the center aisle alone. He paused where Adanna had stood, where a bride becomes a wife in the honest stories, and set his palm on the wood. He did not feel triumph, he felt assignment, the kind that doesn't come with applause. He whispered into the empty space, "Not every wedding is heaven's will, not every smile is love, but truth will always tear the veil." Outside, wind moved the jacaranda leaves. Somewhere in the city, a woman with a limp counted her losses and planned a counterstrike. But the ledger was out of her hands now. Her shadow would meet evidence, and her disguises would meet names. Thanksgiving ended without fanfare, no grand benediction, no final flourish, just the stubborn, ordinary hope of people who had looked darkness in the face and chosen to keep their doors open anyway, not because they were naive, but because they were no longer alone.